sekarang? Halo, Mbak Retno.
Kita mulai sekarang ya, Kak.
Iya, Mbak, silakan.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
In the name of Allah, the most beneficent and the most merciful, may peace, mercy, and blessing of Allah be upon you. May prayers and peace be always upon the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the International Conference of Geography and Disaster Management, ICGDM 2023. Thank you very much to join our second day of ICGDM Virtual Conference 2023. First, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Rastia Faradita. You can call me Farah, your Master of Ceremony for today's conference. I would like to express my gratitude to all invited keynote speakers, the Dean Faculty of Geography, all lecturers of Faculty Geography, and the participants of ICGDM 2023 Day 2. This conference today is divided into two sessions. Today we have one keynote speakers, two invited speakers, and we will listen paper presentation from 4 different sessions. So let's start to our first agenda. We will listening a presentation from Dr. Maxime Sampson from DePaul University, USA. We are very honored to have him today. And this presentation will be moderated by Mr. Wahyu Tias Pramono, Master of Science. But first, I will introduce our moderator. Mr. Wahyu Tias Pramono was graduate from Geography and Environmental Science Universitas Gadjah Mada and continue his master program on Planning and Management of Coastal Area and Watershed Geography Universitas Gadjah Mada. Now, Mr. Wahyu working as full lecturer at Fakulty Geography Universitas Muhammadiyah Surakarta. His research are mainly focused at political geography. Now, please welcome Mr. Wahyu Tias Pramono. Mr. Wahyu, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Retno. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone, and good evening for our speaker from the US. Thank you for coming to online meeting platform and join us in the second day of ICGDM 2023, Faculty of Geography, Muhammadiyah University of Surakarta. Before we go further, let's get to know our speaker for the first sessions from 7:15 a.m. to 8 p.m. who is Dr. Maxime Sampson. You can call him Dr. Max or Dr. Sampson, a cultural and political geographer from DePaul University, Chicago, Illinois, USA. He has been teaching urban and cultural geography, political geography in the US for about 6 years. He has obtained his BA at the Durham University, Master of Science at King's College London or KCL, and followed by the PhD at Leeds University. His research operates at the nexus between geography, religious studies, and education. In particular, he is interested in constructions and contestations of religious identities across a range of spaces, from religious school to city streets, and the implications of this dynamic for citizenship and belonging. Dr. Sampson also acts as the chair of Geography and Religion and Belief System, or GORABS, International Specialty Research Group linked to the American Association of Geographers, or AAG. Me, myself, Wahyu Tias Pramono, will act as moderator in this session. We have first topic of a post-tsunami sea change toward post-secular disaster response. Time allocation is about 30 minutes and then followed by the 15 minutes of Q&A session. So the participant can directly ask question or through chat box. Okay, without further ado, all right, Dr. Maxime Sampson, time is yours.
Terima kasih, Selamat Pagi. Thank you so much for being here so early. I'm sorry about that. have a currently 12-hour time difference. As you've heard, based in Chicago, but I'm currently speaking from Boston. I'm very jealous of your undoubtedly warm weather. It's very cold here. It's about freezing temperature. So what I'm going to be doing today is talking, as you've heard, about some research I've done with a friend and colleague in Indonesia, Ariska Warganegara, on tsunami response. And my angle here is to talk about some of the religious implications or the possible involvement of religious actors in this very important issue. So how can we better include religious groups which often have a lot to say and a lot to contribute to disaster response, but too often, I think, get quite marginalized. That's going to be the aim of what I'm going to highlight here, based on a case study, which I'm sure many of you have come across because it is from Indonesia. So I hope I don't sound like I'm, I don't know, talking about something which you already know plenty about. But I hope that I can apply a particular theory to disaster response in order to demonstrate, I think, a very, for me, interesting way of bringing these two issues together. So sort of religion in society and how to respond to tsunami disasters in the most effective way possible. So as a starting point, I just want to use an excerpt from a speech by the current president, not for too much longer, of course, but from Joko Widodo back in 2019. I found this speech very interesting when I came across it because I think it says quite a lot about a sort of possible intersection between religion and disaster response. So the president said, we have to start providing disaster education this year, especially in disaster-prone areas. We need to utilize schools and religious leaders. The Almighty God has blessed Indonesia with fertile lands. Yet this country is also situated on the Pacific Ring of Fire, and we must keep a watchful eye on it. Now, on the surface, a speech by a political leader about the need to respond to a disaster doesn't seem particularly momentous. It doesn't seem particularly significant, but I think there are a few very interesting elements here. For a start, as you'll know, Indonesia is officially a secular country, but it's one with very high rates of religiosity. And so this kind of call to bring in religious groups and to actually mention God, Allah, is, I think, quite interesting in a speech in any case. But I think just as importantly is the history of disaster response in many societies and amongst many humanitarian missions. As I'll mention in a bit more detail later, humanitarian organizations have a certain tendency much of the time to marginalize religious perspectives and voices, even though a lot of them were created by religious people, and a lot of them have a religious ethos. And this has often been the case, even in a lot of Indonesian history going back to the New Order period. So this call to actually include a range of actors, including religious groups, but also educational institutions, for example, I think marked a certain sea change. And going back to the title of this presentation, a post-tsunami sea change, it's of course a bit of a play on how tsunami are often created. I think it marks a certain paradigm shift in society in terms of welcoming religious groups into an issue which affects potentially everybody. So in this talk, what I'm going to do is a few things. I'm going to, following that introduction, talk a little bit about secularism and humanitarianism, bringing together two very noteworthy issues, one more theoretical, one more practical, and try and carve out a possible way in which humanitarianism can better accommodate religious voices, which sometimes doesn't happen under a secularist system. I'm also going to introduce the religious organizations and a bit of basis to religion that Ariska and I used in this case study. But before I present the case study specifically, I want to present a certain post-secular vision based on the theory of Jürgen Habermas, who is often associated with this idea of post-secularity. Basically, what can we learn about this vision for the future of religion in society, and how might we apply it to disaster response? So then I'll present the case study very briefly, and I'm going to present some of the interview-based findings we obtained in 3 sections. The first one on neutrality and impartiality as 2 terms which religious groups are often said not to have amongst many humanitarian missions. They're often said not to be neutral and not to be impartial. And I want to argue that actually there are many ways in which they can show these very important traits. I then want to talk about trust, another thing which I think religious organizations can often bring to humanitarian missions and disaster response. Following that, I'm going to start bringing things together and show that religious perspectives are the key to what I'm going to describe as post-secular tsunami response. And this will enable me to point towards a certain model of collaboration between religious and secular actors in order to achieve what I hope would be the most effective tsunami response possible. So, in terms of secularism and humanitarianism, there's a lot I can say about this. I mean, these are both huge issues. But if I just had to briefly go over some of the basis, in terms of society, a lot of the time, discourse presents modernization as something which inevitably leads to secularization, that the more a society modernizes, the more secular it becomes. And this tends to be framed in 3 ways. Firstly, differentiation. So basically what people in societies like the US will call the separation of church and state. Religious organizations no longer are as relevant in things like politics and economics as they once were. And instead, religious groups are all about religion. So that's differentiation. Secondly, privatization. This idea that where religion exists today, it's increasingly in private spaces, and we'll see it less in public. And thirdly, the decline of religion, that people's beliefs in, let's say, God are declining, that people are practicing their religion less. Just religion is just declining in general. So these 3 dynamics or trends are often seen as examples or proof that society is secularizing, and they're often said to be caused by modernization. Now, in reality, this is quite problematic. The theory is quite limited, and it's often been described as very Eurocentric, and I think there's a lot of good evidence of that it's really mostly applicable to Western European contexts, and that these trends haven't really been seen in most of the rest of the world. But this notion that modern society leads to a decline in religion remains quite compelling. And I think we do still often see this tendency to believe that religion doesn't have as much impact in many important endeavors as it once did. Now, another important limitation here is that in reality, religious and secular values intersect in really important ways. There's all sorts of ways in which something can be simultaneously religious and secular, and people can show religious and secular values all at once. And I think about this in terms of something like government collaboration or government outreach. If a government all over the world wants to try and reach different communities, they'll often go through religious leaders. It's quite a useful way of connecting with people and getting all sorts of people's perspectives. We also see that religion is very public. There's a lot of evidence that religion has certainly not disappeared, even in so-called modern societies. Religion is still a very powerful presence. And yet, what about humanitarianism? As I want to show, a lot of humanitarianism and disaster response continues to look through a fairly secular lens, which has the result of pushing religion to the side. So even though, as I've established, religion remains important in society and has a lot of intersection with secular values, humanitarianism doesn't always reflect that and actually tends to be dominated by just a very rigid sort of secular worldview. Now, part of my curiosity about this subject was piqued by just thinking about where many natural disasters occur. Many of these societies, many of the most disaster-prone societies across the world, are also highly religious societies. That's not, of course, an inevitable relationship, but there is a certain inkling. A lot of people, have been looking into this, that maybe disasters do make people more religious. Yes, there are other factors involved, but religion is important in terms of coping. It can help people develop a certain survival spirit in places which are at high risk. So just thinking about a lot of disaster-prone countries, I think of the Philippines, Haiti, and Honduras, for example. These are all religious societies in many ways, and they're also prone to disasters. So in theory, you would expect religious voices would have quite a lot of say, that religion would be very important in humanitarianism. And yet a lot of research from these contexts indicates that actually a humanitarian organization will come in from abroad and will often kind of push the religious groups to the side and not really see them as so relevant, and will have certain issues with them. This can be manifested, for example, in terms of skepticism of religious leaders, viewing them suspiciously, maybe believing they're trying to convert vulnerable people. When it comes to providing daily necessities, of course, a lot of people will expect somewhere where they can pray or practice certain rituals. These don't tend to be priorities amongst many international humanitarian groups. They may deny religious understandings, which are often quite fatalistic. So not all the time, but a lot of religious viewpoints in disaster-prone areas are around the idea that this was meant to be, that it's some kind of, it's a deity's judgment, for example. And these understandings are quite commonplace across much of the world, and they tend to be sort of seen as superstitious and not really to be trusted. But actually, there is potentially a role that they can play in preparing people, as I'm going to argue later. We also see that a lot of organizations are not that interested in reconstructing places of worship, the destruction of which can be highly traumatic and very much mourned. Now, in terms of research into humanitarianism and religion, most remains quite focused on major international organizations, something like Caritas, Salvation Army, Muslim Aid. All of these are religiously based organizations, but what we see is that these organizations are often forced to downplay their faith dimensions. They're often kind of expected or compelled to push religion a bit to the side in order to seem acceptable or legitimate, that more purely secular organizations don't trust them if they try and push a sort of faith agenda. And so we see like religion is there, but it's not really front and center. It's kind of pushed to the side. So the overall result of this is that faith groups are made quite passive when they come to collaborate in humanitarianism. That even though faith groups might be able to offer quite a lot, they're actually made to be quite passive actors. Now, this is even reflected in the codes of conduct, for example, of a lot of international humanitarian organizations. So I was having a look through. This is the International Red Cross and Red Crescent. Again, it has two religious symbols in its logo, so you would expect it to have quite a big push for religion. But its third principle is to not use aid to further a particular political or religious standpoint, which does kind of imply that there's a suspicion that religious groups might try and force religion on people. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees identifies a number of potential challenges that may emerge when partnering with faith actors as well, including things like exclusion, hate speech, incitement to violence, proselytization, so forcible conversion, harmful traditional practices, gender stereotypes, and stigma. So again, this doesn't really sound like religious groups are to be trusted. That's not to say this isn't the whole picture, but it's quite interesting that these major international groups, which often do have a religious ethos are also quite suspicious about religion in many ways. So, if I were to bring this over to the Indonesian context, I think first of all about Pancasila. Okay, so the foundational philosophy of the country has at its core acceptance of a single God. Yet at the same time, the constitution declares the country a secular unitary republic. Now, this isn't that unusual to have this kind of balancing act between religion and secularism. It's true in the United States in many ways, although kind of more recently in terms of how it's often expressed. But it is quite noteworthy, I think, that we have a secular country where acceptance of a single God is the very first principle. So a religious viewpoint is clearly quite important to the country. Now, according to the most recent data I could find, about 87% of the Indonesian population currently identifies as Muslim, and that's not including people who identify with other religious groups as well, of course. And in South Lampung, which is where we conducted our research, this figure rises to as high as 96%. So a very religious context, but with a secular organization, a secular kind of background and origin. And of course, throughout much of Indonesia's independent history, there has been quite a clear sort of secular push. It's been greater sort of religious pluralism in the political system since the late 1990s for various reasons. But there's still this kind of quite clear, I think, secular origin to much of the country's kind of independent story. Now, in terms of the two main religious organizations I'm going to discuss, one of them will be, of course, very familiar to you because of the university affiliation and name, Muhammadiyah, and secondly, NU. So Muhammadiyah with maybe a slightly more modernist Islamic perspective, and NU with maybe a slightly more traditional perspective. These organizations have, of course, been around for a very long time. They predate Indonesia as an independent nation, and historically, they've been involved in all sorts of things, from healthcare to education, and often in politics when they've had the opportunity. Less known, I think, at least internationally perhaps, is that they also have their own disaster wings. They also are involved in disaster response. NU integrates this. Muhammadiyah has the MDMC as a sort of affiliate organization. So they both include disaster response in their mission, but they don't specialize in it per se. They're not like, let's say, the Red Cross, which is first and foremost a humanitarian organization. But still, we can see religiously based organizations having a clear interest in disaster response and humanitarianism, and both of them were established following a disaster, the Yogyakarta earthquake in the case of Muhammadiyah, I believe. So they both do a lot of things, and that includes disaster response, and their primary focus in both cases is dawah. So it is quite clearly a religious focus. So how does this play out? How can we include religious perspectives in humanitarianism and disaster response, something which theoretically affects people who are religious and are not religious? It affects really everybody, potentially kind of equally. This is where the post-secular vision comes in. So just to be clear, this theory is not to do with humanitarianism. I'm applying it to humanitarianism myself. Jürgen Habermas is probably the most well-known proponent, person who's promoted this theory. And I'm going to cite just a 2008 paper he wrote on post-secularity. In this article, he challenges the notion that religion has declined in society. So what I mentioned before, he says that actually religion has had a resurgence, that religion is very important. It has a great public influence and relevance. And yet, despite this kind of rise in religion in recent years, it tends to be pushed to the side. Secular groups and voices tend to predominate in politics and in social interactions, forcing religion to the margins. He calls this an uneasy modus vivendi, whereby secular citizens refuse to recognize the views and legitimacy of their religious counterparts. So religious groups trying to have a say in important matters, but are being treated suspiciously and are pushed to the sides by secular groups. In response, Habermas argues that we need what he calls complementary learning processes, that each side listens to the other in order to work out a better way of kind of developing society, that actually both viewpoints, religious and secular, have legitimacy, can add something important, and that secular organizations and citizens need to actually recognize that religious people can also contribute much to these issues. Now, much has been made about this theory. There's been a lot of important critiques, notably that he has this tendency to separate religious and secular as a binary again, which is, again, quite hard to do in reality. People tend to be a bit of both in most cases. And also whether some of these trends are actually as new as he claims. But what I want to say is the core part of his argument, I think, is really meaningful and important to humanitarianism, because it highlights how secular values tend to predominate, and that actually we need secular or so-called secular individuals to be more open to religious perspectives in order to facilitate cooperation. He highlights that religious viewpoints actually can have a lot of value in the public domain. So this is what I want to argue. This is kind of why I've chosen this idea of post-secularity to discuss disaster response, because we have humanitarian groups often suspicious about religious organizations and pushing them to the side. Bringing the post-secular theory to that issue, I think, helps us rethink how disaster response occurs or could occur. I wouldn't say that disaster response is in any way post-secular at the moment, but I think there is potential to make it so, to recognize the legitimacy and value of religious voices in this important issue. So the case study site is South Lampung, a very historically disaster-prone area, most famously because of the Krakatoa eruption back in 1883, but more recently, the magnitude 7.2 earthquake of 1994, which tragically killed 134 people and led to many other injuries. This is quite a noteworthy case because there's quite a lot of news reporting that a corruption scandal at the same time limited the distribution of aid. But the case study that Ariska and I used was the 2018 Sunda Strait tsunami, which led to 108 deaths and 279 injuries, specifically in South Lampung. So again, another very major issue, and again, one which had a certain government scandal surrounding it. So in terms of some findings, I want to raise this question about, are secular organizations less neutral or impartial than religious organizations? This is often the assumption, but what our findings through interviewing people with Muhammadiyah, MDMC, NU, the local government, we also interviewed an independent statutory authority as a kind of fairly neutral observer, who was hopefully going to be a bit less biased. What people consistently said is that actually religious organizations can support everybody. And this was often expressed through dawah. So this conviction about nobody should be treated differently, that you need to, as these quotes show, everyone is equal, even if they're not Muslim. Humanitarian aid was not based on just religion, so anyone who needed it could access it. MDMC said we helped them even if they weren't Muslim, and likewise NU said we need to provide a benefit for the whole community, not only the Muslim community. I think this raises an interesting point about religion and proselytization, because even though this is often seen as quite a dangerous element of disaster response, might there also be the potential for religious groups to use that concept to try and help everybody? That first and foremost, because they have an interest in sharing faith with people, actually, that can make them particularly active in going to people who need their support. In reality, very few people seem to be converted by religious organizations in humanitarian missions. There have been some cases where this has been a problem, but it tends to be the minority. Instead, what I thought these quotes demonstrate is that actually there is this desire and determination amongst religious organizations to try and help everybody because of that religious ethos. And this came down to trust as well, because the religious groups, this was backed up by the independent authority, were the first on the scene, that the government was quite slow to respond, but religious groups actually came in very fast and were seen as trustworthy partners. MDMC described itself as a command center, training volunteers to cook, provide therapy and first aid. Muhammadiyah was able to really build on its massive network to receive donations from across the country, again, because it's seen as trustworthy. So whereas something like a local government might only be of interest to people in that neighborhood, and if a disaster strikes, of course, it's under a lot of pressure and has a lot of other things to deal with. An organization like Muhammadiyah has a certain advantage because it's national and has even international links. And therefore, it's able to get this much wider support because it's trusted and can bring that support to people in need. So during the disaster response, the local government was often described as being kind of ill-equipped. There was a sense of disappointment amongst the interviewees that they have the resources, but were slow to respond and didn't do as much as they should. What someone at Muhammadiyah said, the local government wasn't competent to coordinate us. Secondhand clothes were not distributed properly to victims. MDMC said there was a lack of coordination because the local government had low capacity. It lacked the ability and skill to deal with or respond to the natural disaster. So we had religious groups very quick on the scene, quite focused. We had local government not really being that able to coordinate them. And part of the issue that occurred, we found in our interviews with the disaster response, was that each group did its own thing. So Muhammadiyah did its own thing, NU did its own thing, the government did its own thing. I should mention we also interviewed ADAPT communities. They were doing their own thing. And instead, wouldn't it have been better had the government, for example, been willing to listen to religious perspectives, listen to religious organizations, and provide a much more holistic, collaborative response? I'm aware of time, so I'm going to try and finish quite smoothly and quickly, because starting to bring all this together, I think what we can see, I hope, is that if we integrate religious and secular understandings of disasters, local communities can receive support which is appropriate to them. So I thought one thing that was interesting in the interviews was this concept of calamity, that these are unavoidable according to both a scientific and a religious perspective. But at the same time, you can alleviate those impacts through a mixture of religion and practical action. And I thought this was quite a good quote. So we have regular dawah activities, and we often suggest to our members living in tsunami-prone locations to move to a safer place. So we advise people to relocate their homes to a higher area. But it's difficult because the current location is a tourist attraction and can therefore generate an income for people. So essentially, there's this religious understanding that if Allah wants there to be a disaster in an area, that'll happen. Also, that tsunami will occur in the Pacific Ring of Fire because it is just a naturally disaster-prone area. But at the same time, we need to recognize that people are concerned about more than just religion, that economics are also important. People want to make money. They want to make a livelihood. People can't be expected to move away from the coast if that's where their income is coming from. Muhammadiyah seemed to understand that quite well. that people have a lot of different priorities. They might have religious priorities, but they also have economic priorities. A solely secular perspective would only focus on the economic. It would ignore the value of religion. And what we saw with the interviews was that organizations like Muhammadiyah were much better able to frame disaster response through a kind of religious language to sort of explain what people should do, because that makes sense religiously, but also kind of more secularly. Likewise, MDMC described educating people how to deal with tsunamis using a religious approach. So again, sort of framing how disasters occur and why they occur through a mixture of science and religion. And this is something which a lot of people are much more willing to accept. In terms of NU, it was kind of similar. So how can we improve our members' economic situation? They mentioned providing a number of services before the government did, things like a tent and then a non-permanent shelter, providing toilets, so a practical secular need, but also providing a prayer room. So really recognizing the wide range of needs that people in this area had, needing quite mundane, practical things, as well as religious facilities. Also just recognizing that people would have to be in this situation for a long time. And you seem to have been in the area providing support much longer than the government did. And therefore, having this sense of responsibility as a religious organization to helping people. So what I want to really just kind of express here is, well, I think the next slide helps clarify. Religious organizations bring a lot of advantages to disaster response. They have very wide networks, so they can get financial donations and expertise from a lot of places, and of course will train people across the country. They have a lot of local knowledge. They will often know local communities better than anyone else because they're so involved. They're providing schools, universities, healthcare. They understand people's needs better than most people, most organizations. And they can provide a personal, sensitive touch. So they have these advantages, which I think need to be included in disaster response. And yet they can often feel quite marginalized because a lot of other groups feel their motives are biased and self-serving, that they're only helping out because they're trying to attract new members. This quite cynical view that sometimes secular organizations have. It's also clear, I hope, through those interview quotes, that there isn't any strict divide between religious and secular humanitarianism, that actually provision of material, providing support is guided by faith, that you can provide economic benefits because that is what being a good religious person is all about. So kind of religion actually can support more secular economic or social benefits. So I think we need this kind of shift in mentality, or a lot of humanitarian missions need a certain shift, that rather than viewing religious voices as irrelevant or worse, detrimental, actually damaging to disaster response, we need to see them as potentially valuable. Now, just to finish, if there's a moment, if I have time, Ariska led on this, develop this model of collaborative governance. Now, I'm not going to talk about it in full because I don't have the time, and there's quite a lot to it, and part of it is about adapt communities, which I haven't really discussed today. But what this model, we hope, does, inspired by Ansel and Gash's model of collaborative governance, is think through certain advantages of different groups in disaster response, thinking about what can each act bring and how can we bring all of that together to have a more suitable outcome as a disaster response mission. So what we identified is that hopefully, at least, this is kind of an idealized view in many ways, the local government will be open and eager to collaboration, that instead of thinking it is the only group involved in disaster response and pushing everyone else to the side, it'll be open to collaboration. that it will facilitate interactions, dialogue, discussion between different groups. They're also financially independent. They can bring in donations. They often have very wide economic networks. So they can bring in this money. They can bring in human resources. They often have trained people on the staff and volunteers. They're often very involved in providing all sorts of people who are trained to provide support when disaster strikes. And crucially, they're also hopefully generally sensitive to community needs. The leaders are often people who go out into the community, talking to people, understanding their concerns. And so they provide many of the soft skills which sometimes governments can lack. And bringing all of these together, all of these qualities together, we hope to propose a better way of responding to disasters such as tsunami in countries like Indonesia, where there is a highly religious population, but an officially secular government system. So this is my last slide. Going back to Habermas's theory, I think we have this importance of complementary learning processes, this need to listen to, rather than immediately reject, other citizens or organizations simply because they have a religious affiliation. As Habermas warns, were secular citizens to encounter their fellow citizens with the reservation that the latter, because of their religious mindset, are not to be taken seriously as modern contemporaries, they would revert to the level of a mere modus vivendi and would thus relinquish the very basis of mutual recognition, which is constitutive for shared citizenship. So basically that secular citizens need to recognize their religious counterparts as proper actors who can help out. As I've shown, I hope, this continued dominance of secular discourses on neutrality, impartiality, and material needs over local knowledge and understanding, commitment to communities, and the potential for religious beliefs to build resilience can prove quite problematic. It can be quite limiting. And so instead, complementary learning processes, the two different groups coming together, listening to each other and respecting each other, I hope will provide a more effective means across the world, really, in terms of responding to disasters, which can really affect all aspects of a society. So thank you so much for listening. If you're curious to learn more, this is the main article that we put together, published a couple of years ago about this topic with the same title. We have another one which discusses the collaborative governance model in more detail, which I can also share the details with if you're interested. But thank you so much for listening. Terima kasih, and I will stop there.
Okay, thank you so much. We are arriving in the Q&A session. If all students have any questions, please, you can directly ask to us or just type through chat box. Okay, if not, I will have question. I have two questions. The first is, in what point the individual and society are considered as the secular? This is only based on the religious practices, such as ritual, or the way of thinking that in many ways religion is not relevant in the modern society. And second, in what ways secularism appear in a homogeneous society, especially like Indonesia, where the majority of them are Muslim, or Buddhism in Thailand and Catholic in Philippines, as a response of the humanitarian aid whenever that area affected by the disaster. This is only happened when an outsider or international aid came to that area, or in what way?
Yeah, good questions. And I'm trying to remember back to the first one specifically, but the word secular has a lot of different meanings and it's changed a lot over time. So it's very socially contingent. And it's why I wanted to try and contextualize it a bit today. It is applied differently depending on where you are. But whereas, a lot of the time people kind of see it as meaning non-religious, in reality, it's more to do with neutrality over religious matters. So trying to not be guided by any religious perspective. And I think that's quite true universally. Essentially, a lot of modern secular societies follow one of two or three kind of main models of secularism. Basically, the United States was the first country in the world to describe itself as secular. France very quickly did, not quickly, but France does as well. They both understand it very differently. The US is very much about religion can exist, but it shouldn't be in the government, essentially. And people should have freedom of religion. France is much more about freedom from religion, that actually religion should be very much pushed down. And a lot of other societies across the world have kind of taken one of those two perspectives. I'd say a lot of the time, interestingly, the French version to an extent. So somewhere like Turkey for a long time was kind of trying to marginalize religion. So in terms of, and I'm just trying to remember the exact wording of your question, in terms of where secularism comes in, it does depend a lot on the context. But the fact that so many countries, including Indonesia, describe themselves as secular, I think does demonstrate this commitment to not letting any one religious group predominate and to guide politics, that there should be a degree of neutrality over religion. In reality, that tends to be very hard to do. This is kind of a big limitation, including in the United States. And you mentioned for the second question, homogenous societies. I actually don't really know, I'm not really convinced the degree of homogeneity actually is all that important in many cases. The United States is a very heterogeneous society, but it still absolutely has a dominance of one main religion, which is certain forms of Protestantism in society. In fact, a lot of quite homogenous societies do have a secular system. So although it's kind of moved away from it in recent years, Turkey would be one example. A lot of countries around sort of North Africa, excuse me, kind of what we might call the Middle East, a lot of them are officially secular countries, but they tend to be one religion predominantly. And then you get someone like India, which is very diverse and is also officially secular, but again also has one religion which does tend to dominate politics more than the other. So in short, I think actually more key to this is how committed is the government to ensuring that regardless of what religion you identify with, you have equal say. I'm not so sure it matters as much on how diverse a society is. And of course, Indonesia, has a Muslim majority, but it absolutely has significant religious minorities in certain places. I think what's really key is that the government is willing to ensure that religious viewpoints have a say, but they also don't lead. Essentially, it's finding a balance and recognizing that they are just as legitimate as a so-called non-religious organization. Does that kind of answer it? If there's any questions on that, let me know.
Oh yeah, from the meeting chat box, we have one other question. Hello, Mr. Samson. My name is Huda from UMS. I have a question about the perspective and movement of religious groups, which in reality provide many benefits when disaster occurs. But this way has negative stigma that comes from labeling and framing from social media. So my question is how we do to overcome this.
Yeah, great question. And it's something which I hope I kind of alluded to a little bit, but you've kind of rightly highlighted it a bit more explicitly, because I agree this is part of the challenge, that a lot of the time there is this stigmatization of religious groups when it comes to something like disaster response, and social media absolutely kind of intensifies this because we see very simplistic arguments. I think there's a number of stages, there's a number of different levels to overcoming this problem. I would say I hope the model I presented and what I've kind of discussed would be the first step. So actually having different international groups recognize the value of religious organizations and actually include them, and thereby religious groups can then say, well, this is how we contributed. Again, they can do that on social media as well if they want. It sounds a little bit maybe look at us, but if it's about overcoming stigma, they can say, well, we provided this support. You can use the media to actually try and highlight that to a wider audience. But the first step, I think, unfortunately, is trying to convince secular organizations, humanitarian organizations, to actually recognize the value of religious groups. So I think, unfortunately, in the first step, the challenge is really for religious groups to continue just doing what they're doing, to provide humanitarian support, to be active, to be highly responsive. And then if that can be publicized through news and local governments, for example, can see what they're doing, they might come to see them as more effective partners. I'd also kind of hope that maybe religious organizations can be maybe quite, I don't know if they always do this, but they can actually contact governments on their own and just say, by the way, the next disaster that strikes, we have allocated these resources ready to help. Please let us know because we can work together. I think maybe there has to be a degree of religious groups kind of taking the initiative in that way. It sounds awful because I think a lot of the emphasis should be on the secular organizations to accommodate them. But sometimes I think, you have to make yourself known. And I think maybe a lot of religious groups have to be more willing to or more active in sort of saying, this is what we have available. This is what we can contribute to any kind of humanitarian mission. It might also involve, and I think it does involve, something like Muhammadiyah and NU in the case of Indonesia, talking more about what they can do as well. So kind of showing that they are united. They might have different missions, they might have different perspectives about certain things in society and sometimes Bibles. But when it comes to disaster response, that's an important issue ultimately, where people's lives are at stake. And so I think kind of these organizations talking more and sharing resources, I think will make them a much bigger presence. And that will eventually help overcome this kind of stigmatization. That would be my optimistic answer.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions from students? No, I think enough for this session. So before we end for the first session in the second day of ICDKM, I will bring you the certificate. So I will share my share screen first. So this is a certificate for you as one of the keynote speaker in this ICDM. So we also will send the certificates to you after this. So for Mbak MC, Mbak Retno, can probably take the picture.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
it's great.
Okay. Done.
So thank you so much for all participants, to all students, and we will meet again with Mr. Sampson in the class sessions of the online class for geopolitics, maybe next week. Yeah. Thank you so much and bye for now. Good morning.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Selamat pagi to you. And I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you very much to Mr. Wahyu and also Dr. Maxim for the presentation. The next session, we will listening presentation from invited speaker, Dr. Muhammad Ainul Malawani, Master of Science from Universitas Gadjah Mada. In this presentation, we will moderate by Mr. Danardono, Master of Science. Before that, I will introduce our moderator. Mr. Danardono was graduate from Geography and Environmental Science, Universitas Gadjah Mada, and continue semester program on Environmental Science, Universitas Gadjah Mada. Mr. Danardono now works as full lecturer at Fakultas Geografi Universitas Muhammadiyah Surakarta, and his research are mainly focused about environment management, hydrology, carbon, and karst studies. Now, please welcome Mr. Danardono. Mr. Danardono, time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Retno Pradita. I hope my voice is clearly. Ya, Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam.
Excuse me, Mr. Danardono, the speaker is mute.
I'm sorry. Ya. Okay, bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Excellency, Dean of Faculty of Geography Universitas Muhammadiyah Surakarta. Excellency, all of lecture in Geography of the UNS. Excellency, and the speaker, Dr. Fatmedul Malawani, and all of distinguished participants today. First of all, I praise and gratitude to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to do all of His blessing and mercy, so we can attend the conference today in the second session, and praise salutation upon him, our Muhammad. Please keep witness in. Gentlemen, now we have continued our conference, the second session of speech. Before we start the session, let me guide as a moderator to proceed the second session of the United Speech today. And in the session, we have Ainul Malawani as a speaker that will give speech relate to our system today with title tracing the volcanic impact of and 57 CA Samalas eruption from indigenous wetland source. And maybe before this presentation began, you know the presentation in the first part. Speaker will present the material 20 minutes, and after that, and there will be 5 until 10 minutes for Q&A session. And finally, the session will be ended by conclusion and give a certificate. And ladies and gentlemen, we have the session. Before we hear Dr. Muhammad speech, I will read his CV. Dr. Muhammad Ainul Malawani now is a lecturer at Faculty of Geography Universitas Gadjah Mada, Indonesia, and also he is a researcher at Disaster Research Center of SPA UGM Indonesia. Dr. Ainul Malawani was graduated from in geography at University Paris Panthéon-Sorbonne, Paris, with thesis the impact of volcanic eruption on the landscape evolution in Lombok, Indonesia. And I think as a lecturer, Dr. Muhammad Ainul Malawani of publication and several publications that relate with the material that he present today is global and local impact of volcanic eruption and disaster management practice, the Indonesia example, that published in Geoscience in 2021. And also there are a lot of publications that published in during in 10 years ago, I think. And if all participants read a full CV, I think it will send you all of you the speaker CV in this conference, and it will Dr. Elwan to present the material for around 20 minutes. Dr. Elwan, I think the time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Pak Danardono, for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. Thank you from the committee for invite me to become the speaker here, and I hope my present is helpful to us to aware our knowledge related to the impact of volcanic eruption. Okay, I will share my content here. Why just sorry?
Yeah.
Okay, is it visible? Visible? It's okay, Pak Danon?
Yeah, okay. It's visible.
Okay,
It's
I
very
will
clear.
start my presentation.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. My presentation is entitled Tracing the Volcanic Impact of the 1257 CE Samalas Eruption from the Indigenous Wetland Sources. Actually, this is my published paper in the last years in the Journal of Volcanology and Geothermal Research. If you want to read or see the full version of my presentation, you can read my application here. Maybe you can download directly from the Science Direct. Okay. Before I start my presentation, I will tell you about the context of my research, which is Samalas eruption. I will introduce the Samalas eruption in the 1257 CE. It is one of the biggest eruption in the last 2,000 years. It has VEI, or Volcanic Explosivity Index 7, which is a very high explosivity index, and it triggered global impact, such as climatic condition, the climate change in the world at the moment actually lasted 3 years after the eruption. The global climate is disturbed, and then several paper or several research has been investigate this global impact, and also the Samalas eruption also trigger the little ice age, or the shifting of the climate condition after several years after the eruption. So the global impact of this eruption has been investigated clearly, but we have the problem in the local scale, or in the area of Lombok. We can see here in the area of Lombok, the local impact, the investigation of the local impact is untouchable or never been described. So it is strange, or it is strange because why? And this eruption from a small island in Indonesia has triggered a global impact of the climatic condition and several impact in the such in Europe, in China, in Japan, and etc. But in the local part, in the small island of Lombok, there is no information. So based on this condition, based on this background, my and our team want to try to search the impact of this eruption in the local scale in the Lombok area. But you know that Lombok is also unique because there is no trace, or there is no information related to the ancient Lombok. Actually, in the 13th century or before 13th century, there is no information. There is no oral story that passing down generation to generation, and there is no temple, so as in Java, in Yogyakarta, temple that buried by the lahar, buried by the volcanic pyroclastic material. There is no information, and there is no burial site in Lombok. So this is also strange. Why? And then we try to collect some information, go to museum, go to the local scholar, go to the customary village, investigate, and then we got some information that actually Lombok has a written document. We call it Babat, written down in a lontar palm. We call it Babat Lombok. The name of Babat is Babat Lombok. Tell about the process of the eruption. Big eruption in Lombok happened in ancient Lombok that trigger so many impact that make people migrate out of Lombok and etc. And the volcano called Samalas. So based on this Babat, we then investigate the process or the impact of the Samalas eruption. Actually, this is the dataset that I use. But in this session, I just focus in the pre-eruption condition, and then onset of eruption or during the eruption, and then post eruption condition. So the Babat Lombok tell us the story of the Lombok before the eruption, during the eruption, and after the eruption. So I will tell you about the story of the Samalas eruption based on this Babat. Okay, the first is pre-eruption phase. In the Babat Lombok, the story of the condition of the Lombok mentioned that there was a big city, there was a big kingdom called Suwong and called Pamatan. But after we investigate, Suwong is just maybe just a legendary city. Suwong in Javanese, Suwong, you know, Suwong is emptiness. So we call it Suwong because maybe after the eruption, the people go out. The people went out to other island, so as Sumbawa maybe they migrate. So the area of Lombok become Suwong or become empty. So maybe Suwong is not a geographical name or geographical site. It's just a legendary city or a legendary name. But the Pamatan city maybe is actual name or actual city that exists before the Samalas eruption, and this is the core of the population center in the Lombok. So we know the capital city of Lombok before the Samalas eruption. We call it Pamatan. They call it Pamatan. We can see here in the map. This is the village or the city that exist before the Samalas eruption that mentioned in Babat Lombok, Sokas, Selaparang, Batu Kiliang, Kuripan, Pejanggi, Langko, Bayan. But you know that Pamatan is not exist anymore, so we can locate the exact location of Pamatan. But other village, Sokas, Batu Kiliang, Selaparang, and etc. is still exist here. The name is still exist and the location is still exist here. So we can map all of the information before the Samalas and eruption in Lombok. So we can see here in the map the previous civilization before Samalas eruption and the current civilization. We can compare on this map. So we have information before the Samalas eruption, and then during the eruption or since eruption or onset of the eruption, so many descriptions that mention the condition of the crisis, the crisis management or the crisis condition during the eruption. I cite several information here. So as in here, fire rain fell from the sky and hot wind burned everything in Talkuang. So I also using Babat Suwong. Come from also from Lombok and also Babat Lombok here, and also Babat Sembalun. Babat Sembalun actually as oral story, but now has been documented in the written document also. But it is just exist or just tell passing down generation in the Sembalun area. It tells that fire burned like a molten tin. The slope of the Rinjani collapsed completely. Also, description in the Babat Lombok, Mount Rinjani had avalanche and Mount Samalas collapsed, followed by a large flow of debris accompanied by rumbling of boulder. This is the condition of the eruption that tells in the Babat Lombok, Babat Suwong, and Babat Sembalun. We can conclude or we can summarize several information from the eruption. They mentioned about fire. hot wind, rain, avalanche, storm, debris, lava flow, and fire rain. This is all the word that describe the eruption. But this is need a clarification. It really happened or not. Actually, from laughing, my supervisor has been modeled, has been investigated, and has been also reconstruct that all of this description or all of this information related to fire, hot wind, etc. is actually happened during the Samalas eruption. And then we have also information during the Sin eruption or during the eruption. So as the information that inform about the PDC process, about the surge process, the pyroclastic flow process, lahar process, tremor of volcanic, and also the pumice-raft. Some of the description, some of the files told that standard in Lene, triggered by a debris and floating boulder, all of the inhabitant run. Yeah, we can interpret that there was a PDC, there was a lahar. And then I go to the field to collect some information related to the evidence. We can see here the PDC wall that reached until the sea, and then PDC also layered by the lahar in the above of it, and then also PDC in the west of the caldera. So the information has been confirmed using the field evidence. So this is not imagination of the people at the moment to describe the eruption, but this is really happened, and this is the exact information. But some might be exaggerated. So maybe the people tell the story is exaggerated, but all of them is confirmed by the evidence. Maybe you can see here in the evidence of the PDC, lahar, etc. And then in the also past of eruption. They also tell about the management practices during the emergency response. So if we had the eruption, so the cyclus of the management of the disaster management is in the emergency response. So during this emergency response, the people have to save their life. And how do they save their life? In the Babat Lombok, it told that the rest of the royal family fled and took shelter at Jeringo. In this information, we can conclude that Jeringo is a safe place from the PDC, safe place from the asphalt, safe place from the lahar, and etc. So we map all the information of the shelter village of the evacuation site that told in Babat Lombok. So I mapped all of the evacuation set here. You can see several of the evacuation village may located in the area of PDC, but the majority of the evacuation village is located outside the impacted area. So it can be concluded that the evacuation set is the safe place during the Samalas eruption. Other information, so as some of them made their way to Langko and Pecangkih. We can see here Langko here and Pecangkih here. So the inhabitant of the Pamatan, we don't know yet the Pamatan, location of the Pamatan. They felt or they ran away to the Pecangkih, they ran away to Langko, they ran away to the Jeringo, and etc. And they made their way to go out from the impacted location. So this is the emergency phase. We can also imagine that from the original settlement here, the first settlement of the Pamatan, and then they go to the transit location, and then they go to evacuation site. We divided into two different places. The first is just a transit village, and then they go to migrate again in the final evacuation site, and they develop a new civilization in the evacuation site. But in the transit village, they just go to transit in the existed location in the existed village. But evacuation site is the final site that they to be developed in the to become the new village or to become a new city in the next generation. And then using this information, I and my team try to searching where is the Pamatan. using the imagination of they go to the immediate place and then they go to shelter village. So basically there is an original settlement that we call it Pamatan. So we try to find where is the Pamatan. So we can trace using the migration path of the villagers. So we now can locate where is the Pamatan. So we propose that the location of the Pamatan is here based on the geographical context that has been mentioned in the Babat Lombok. So as in the zone of PDC, the yellow area is the PDC, and then located in the slope of volcano. It is located in the slope of the volcano, and then adjacent to the hilly area, it is the hilly area in the middle of the Lombok. Also, this is a hilly and mountainous area in the eastern part of Lombok, and then near to the sea, because some of the people made their way using boat to the Talkuang. So actually, Pamatan is near to the village, and they have port maybe that support the people to be go or run out from the Lombok using their boat to the Talkuang. So using this geographical context, also using the path of the migration flow from the people, so we can locate now where is the Pamatan. So Pamatan, based on our suggestion, located in here. But several researchers also has been proposed the location of the Pamatan, so as in here, in Pok Motong, in the Aikmel, and also in Parigi or Sukian. So all of the suggestion is mentioned that Pamatan located in the eastern part of Lombok, not in the current capital city of Lombok in the Mataram. So we can also conclude Mataram is developed after the Samalas eruption or long after this eruption happened, maybe during the colonial from the Dutch. Okay, this is the result of Pamatan, the location of the Pamatan. And then in the last pass of the eruption, where is the post, which is the post eruption. So they after they migrate or after they conduct the emergency response, and then they recovery, they enter to the recovery phase. So in the recovery phase, also several description described or tell in the Babat Lombok or Sembarang. So here, a new city was built on the Lombok led by the king. There were those at Karangumbul. So all of the information related to the recovery is they want to rebuild the city. They want to rebuild the government. So in the recovery, they rebuild the physical aspect, which is the development of the new city. They construct the building, and then also in the societal aspect, they re-governance the structure of the organization of the government. So as here, in the village of Bayan and Pejanggi in Lombok, he reigned as king. So they elect a new king after the migration. They divided the government. Actually, there was a big government in the Pamatan, and then after the eruption, they become a small organization or small government in each village. So there is no a big kingdom again. So it just divided into a little kingdom or little villager or little leader in the search area in the evacuation site or in the shelter village. And then after that, they also reconstruct the Lombok and the settlement of Lombok. So here, after a long recovery, they become a glorious city. Lombok become the glorious city and prosperous city with a plenty of food, gold, and also ringgit. Actually, it is also hard or difficult to measure how long the recovery took place. So we use several information from the Desa Varnana or Negara Kertagama that written 100 years after the Samalas eruption. It described that Lombok is become the independent city and developed city. So after 100 years of the Lombok, the eruption of the Samalas, the Desa Farnana tell that Lombok has become a independent city and developed city. So, using this information, we conclude that maybe the recovery and reconstruction in Lombok after the Samalas eruption is took for maybe maximum 100 years. So it is a long time, or it is a long period to become very resilient, to become very rebuild the city, to reborn and bounce back to become the independent and developed area. So we have a chart here, or we have a periodization of the reconstruction and social recovery, so as emergency, physical recovery, government recovery, and the social economic recovery, and they become the resilient city in Lombok. For closing my presentation, this is some information that may be important also related to the Samalas eruption. The first is that the population size of the Pamatan before the Samalas eruption is likely 10,000 inhabitants. Maybe it's not a very big city, but it's also quietly a big population in the Lombok. The inhabitant conducted trade of goods with the Baju tribe, because Baju also mentioned in the Babat Lombok, and Baju is come from Sulawesi, so they have connection with the other people in the other island. In the Javanese text, various terms are used to describe the volcanic eruption, such as earthquake, rain, thunderstorm, noise, and collapse, and etc. And the Babat Lombok also described in a similar way. So the story of the Babat in Lombok may similar in the story of the Babat that come from Java. And then from the for conclusion or remark, and this is I just want to highlight that the earlier claim that Babat Lombok is the oldest written source that documenting a significant volcanic eruption in the Southeast Asia might be revisited, because this is not the oldest written source. So many oldest written sources in Japan that might be describe the volcanic eruption that inscribed in the stone, also in the 7th century, also mentioned that there was eruption. So Babat Lombok is just Babat or text that recompiled. So this is not the original documentation. So it's just from the oral story and then documented in the Babat text. But we can conclude that Babat Lombok is the very complete or the one and only document in Indonesia that documented the entire disaster management cycle. So Babat Lombok is one of the complete document that recap or mention the cyclus of the disaster management completely, from the beginning or from the before eruption, during the eruption, and also after the eruption. So there is no document in Indonesia that mention complete SOCAS Lombok related to the disaster management of volcanic eruption. So I think that's all from me, Pak Dandon. We can continue maybe with discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. I think yeah, we have a new insight with the speech that historical documents such as Babat or other historical is help to identify the disaster management in the past or is now part we have 5 until 10 minutes. Ask directly or participant can write down the question in chat box. maybe. Okay, is there any question from all participants? Ya, ini karena banyak mahasiswa ini Pak Alwan karena dari Indonesia ya, kalau mau bahasa Indonesia monggo dipersilahkan, boleh ini teman-teman ya. Boleh ya Pak Alwan ya, kalau mau bahasa Indonesia juga ya.
Ji, monggo.
Teman-teman ada yang mau bertanya sambil nanti. Ya mungkin sambil ini ya, nanti ada yang bertanya yang lain. I think I have question for you, Dr. Alwan. Relate to historical document ya. Sometimes indigenous written or historical document is not a fact condition or it just a myth, I think, as you said, and that Pamatan and
Wong.
Suwung, yeah.
Yeah.
And my question is, how we know or we prove that the historical document can be used to academic research?
Okay.
Because academic research is, I think, is a facts, yeah, not just a myth. I think the first question is.
Okay. Thank you for the question, and it is a good question. Actually, I have discussed this issue in the full paper. Maybe you can also read in the full paper. But I will tell you how to tackling this issue. Okay. The first thing is related to the relevance of the story. First one is maybe we can search the relevancy of the story using a geological information or using geomorphological or geographical information. So the story of the Babat Lombok, Sokas in Lombok, in my research, they mention several geographical sites, Sokas, Pamatan, Suwung, and then Pecanggi, Langko, and etc. We found that majority of this city or on this village is real. We can map, we can locate it in the area. So this is the first evidence. So it is not just a myth, but several also myths. So Kasuwong, where is the location? I don't know, and there is no information about the Suwong. So using the information of geographical name, we can search the relevancy of the text. Is this a fact, or is just a myth, or just a story that without no evidence? And then the first one, we use the geographical site, and then the second one, we use the geological information. So as the information related to the eruption. The eruption is the volcano ejected the fire. The volcano ejected the cloud. During the day, or the day, it seemed like a night. So we can conclude maybe it's just a big cloud cover up the sky, and then the day condition, it seemed like a night. So using the geological reconstruction, we reconstruct the information of the Babat Lombok using the geological information, so as there was a lava, there was a lahar. We find the evidence in the field. If we got some information, so as, oh, okay, there's a lava, okay, and there is a pyroclastic flow, and there is asphalt and etc. So all of the information is not just myth. It is just how the people they tell the story, because they don't know about the scientific information about the volcanic expansion. They just read of the story. So we found using the relevancy tag using the geological condition. We have two information: geographical site and also the geological information or geological evidence. And the last one is confirmed using the oral story, or using the interview with the local, with the museum, with the scholar, or with the we call it juru kunci in the customary village, or in the desa adat. So we go there, and then we talk about this information. Is it confirmed or no? The story is just a myth or not, and etc. So we use we conduct the interview with the with the selected people. And we have information that majority of the Lombok population did know about the story of the Samalas, but the local people in the Sembalun area, they know about the story. So I think that the story of the Samalas passing down generation just in the area of the Samala and the Sembalun area, which is near the Samalas or Rinjani volcano. So maybe they just keep the story only in this generation or in this location, not outside the area of the Lombok. Maybe because I don't know what happened in the societal condition after the eruption, why they don't tell the story about the Lombok of the eruption of the Samala. So using these three information, we confirm which is this is fact or this is myth. Yeah, something like that, Pak Dandon.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Awan. I think it's, good ya. Compile with like the geological identification and also interview is help to identify the historical is.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's. Yeah.
Yeah, we have one question
Pertanyaan ini.
in chat. Maybe short answer maybe.
Ya, ini,
Bagaimana persebaran karakteristik
ya,
masyarakat?
ya, ini ada pertanyaan bahasa Indonesia.
Ya.
Monggo Pak Awan, bisa dijawab
Oke.
bahasa Indonesia boleh ini Mas Pak Ibrahim Ali ya.
Okay, short answer ya Pak Dandon. Okay, after the eruption, the people of Lombok just made out their way to the outside area of the impacted area. We can see in the map that the yellow area is PDC area or covered by the pyroclastic flow. So they just move or they just migrate outside this area, and also they migrate to the Taliwang or Taltuang in the eastern part of Lombok in the Sumbawa Island. But there is no information that they go to Bali in the western island of the Lombok. Maybe because it's because just the population at the moment, Pamatan or the kingdom of the Lombok before the eruption is located in the eastern part. It's not in the western part. So they just go to the Sumbawa or go to the Taliwang, not go to the Bali. So the persebaran or the distribution of the Lombok inhabitant before the Samalas eruption and after Samalas eruption is completely different. Actually, there were just in the eastern part that developed area. Also in the Negara Kertagama or Cisparnana also mentioned that the developed area of Lombok is just in the eastern part. But after the Dutch colonial, the city building or the city development is shifting to the western part, which is in the Mataram. So maybe it took more than 500 years to develop a completely different Lombok before and after the Samalas eruption. Okay, this is the answers, Pak Dandon.
Okay, Pak Ibrahim Ali, is there any feedback? I think so, yeah. To meet again, maybe one question more. If the participant, stop. Is there any question from all participants? Yeah, I think it's
That's all. Yeah.
That's all. I think it's interesting, Dr. Awan, yet historical document can help us to identify about disaster management.
Yes.
And
we
I think
it's we have so many documents in Indonesia, in Java, that maybe we can also trace. We can also investigate. So as my research, this is so many documents that untouchable. This is opportunity for us.
Yeah. I think that's all, Dr. Awan. Thank you very much for speech today. And before I end this session, I will give you a certificate Dr. Awan. Sorry. This is dedicated for you.
Yeah.
For this today.
Yes. Thank you,
I
Pak
mean,
Danar, and thank you all of the committee.
yeah, maybe before we end, MC Ratna can help us to get take photo, maybe.
Oke, hitungan 1, 2, 3 ya Pak. 1, 2, 3. Oke, dan
Okay, thank you. It's
Thank
enough
you.
for this session. Thank you, Dr. Awan, and for
Thank
the
you.
information.
Yeah, thank you. See you in another
Thank you, Dr. Awan.
conference.
Yeah. And for the information to all participants that in the next is parallel session, and maybe after that the MC will get you to parallel session, and I think it's enough. Thank you very much for today. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Yeah, I'll give back to Mbak Retno.
Okay, thank you very much to Mr. Bernardono and also Dr. Muhammad Ainul Malawani for the presentation. After this, we will continue to our paper presentation session. Parallel session will be start at 9 until 11:30. But first, I will explain to you all. We will divide for 4 rooms, and each room will have different theme. For track 1 is physical, will be moderated by Mr. Aziz Akbar. Track 2 is social, will be moderated by Mr. Wahyu Dias Pramono. Track 3 is technical, will be moderated by Mr. Afif. And track 4 is disaster, will be moderated by Mr. Iqbal Taufikur Rahman. For participants who will present your presentation, please join based on your paper track. And for all the participants, you have free option to choose which room you will join. And I will remind you all, after the paper presentation we will have break time, and don't forget to join again at 12:30. So let's start and move to our paper presentation and see you at 12:30 in the main room.